Austerity is basically fiscal tightening. It usually takes the form of cuts in government expenditure and sometimes accompanied by increases in taxes. And the objective is to reduce the government's deficit and levels of public debt. Austerity is only going to be effective in reducing a government's deficit if the economy is in a sustainable recovery, or ideally a period of strong growth. And in that context, you won't even notice the austerity. On the other hand, if austerity is implemented when an economy is in a recovery, but it's not yet established itself, austerity is simply going to cut off and kill off the expansion. When an economy is in a recession, that's technically 2 quarters of negative growth or zero growth, which means the problem is GDP growth. And if the government cuts spending at that point in time, an important part of GDP is being withdrawn, which is going to make the problem worse. But it's also going to be happening at the same time as something called automatic stabilizers kick in. So automatically, when the economy goes into a recession, you see social costs increase, things like unemployment benefit and other Social Security payments. But if the government cuts spending at the same time as its costs are going up and its tax revenues are going down, that it inevitably makes the recession much longer and deeper than it would otherwise be. The social effects of austerity are obvious. We see them all around us. In fact, here we are today in the Euston Foodbank, and food poverty is one of the really serious effects of austerity. In fact, I was told just before this interview that this food bank was opened in 2010, which was exactly the year that austerity became the policy that the government was pursuing. The Trussell Trust, which manages the food bank system in the UK, has reported that during the past year, 1.6 million emergency food parcels have been distributed, and that represents an increase of 19% for the year and 73% for the past 5 years. And most of the people who are relying on these emergency food parcels are actually in work, so they're choosing to pay their rent over buying food, and then they're forced into dependence on places like this, which thankfully are here to provide it. I think the problem that we need to focus on now is what our actual economic problems are. Those being things like unacceptable levels of unemployment and underemployment, poverty, including food poverty, and economic insecurity. And we should be focusing on those problems and trying to develop policy to address them instead of dogmatically sticking to austerity. We have a book called Rethinking Britain, Policy Ideas for the Many that is out now, actually. And then my book, Austerity, is coming out in November. And that provides a much more detailed look at austerity as a policy and the history of austerity in terms of the idea, case studies, and how it's worked out in reality.